USC's number one recruiting class was supposed to be the reason the Trojans would become scary maybe a year or two from now, but I'm not starting to think that timeline anymore. I think that might be wrong. So, in this episode of the Big Ten Huddle presented by FanDuel, I want you to listen because I know what you're thinking. Every August, we hear about freshmen who look incredible in fall camp. Then September arrives and the veterans take the snaps. Half of those freshmen, yeah, they get time, but they've mostly disappeared. They're not the star players of the team. But that's not what makes this USC class interesting. The story isn't that one five-star freshman looks good. The story is that USC has young players pushing toward real roles at wide receiver, tight end, defensive end, and even along the offensive line as well. If just a handful are ready now, Lincoln Riley's roster might be a year ahead of schedule. USC brought in 35 high school signees in this class, and 32 were scheduled to enroll early enough to participate in spring practice. That matters more than the stars next to their names. Most of these guys didn't show up in August trying to learn where the meeting rooms were and stuff like that. They already went through spring football. They already installed the offense and the defense. They're already learned what they're bad at, what they're good at, all of these things. So when fall camp arrives, USC wasn't at a starting point of zero with a lot of these players. That's the first thing people are missing. And the best example might be a guy like Trent Mosley. Mosley is not the biggest receiver in the class, but he might be the freshman who makes the quickest impact. USC lost a ton of proven production at receiver, creating a real question in this entire season. Who becomes the most dependable inside target? Who becomes the guy Jada Mayava can trust on 3rd and 6 when the ball has to come out? And I've got good news for you. In fact, great news for you. Mosley spent the spring making a serious argument that the answer could be him. What keeps coming up with Mosley isn't just athletic ability, it's how quickly he processes the offense, how seriously he prepares, and how polished he already looks for as a freshman. That matters. Receiver is one of the hardest positions to hide confusion, right? You can be fast and have great hands, but if the quarterback expects you at 8 yards away from where you actually are, or to break at 10 yards, then the play is dead. And here's the first question I want you thinking about. What if USC didn't just recruit its future replacement at receiver? What if that wasn't the thing that they just did? What if it recruited one of its current answers? Because Mosley isn't alone. You also have a guy who flipped his commitment from Ohio State to USC. Caden Dixon-Wyatt is another early enrollee freshman. He brings more size, strong hands, and the ability to make plays down the field. So USC doesn't need one freshman receiver to save the room by any means. Let Mosley carve out his role. Let Dixon-Wyatt carve out another. Let the veterans, carry the burden they should carry. That is a much healthier way to use a recruiting class, and it gets more interesting at tight end. Mark Bowman reclassified, skipped what would have been his final year of high school, and enrolled early and walked into USC looking like someone who physically belonged. Now, normally you would have a lot of concerns about a guy reclassifying, becoming a college player when they're supposed to be a senior, especially playing on the line of scrimmage, but he's a 6'4", around 245 pounds, and was one of the most highly regarded tight ends in the country. Now, I'm not telling you a true freshman tight end is automatically going to become, a dominant Big Ten linebackers in September or anything like that. That position can be brutal for freshmen, especially the changing their class ones, because you're learning two jobs at once. You have to understand the passing game like a receiver and survive the box like an offensive lineman. But Bowman doesn't have to become an All-American for this to happen. I think I said Bowen first. Bowman. If he becomes a real rotational weapon, USC suddenly has another matchup piece it didn't have to go find in the portal. That's the larger story here. USC has spent much of the Lincoln Riley era trying to patch immediate roster problems with immediate roster solutions. Now the construction is beginning to look different. Recruit the player, get him on campus early, develop him, and when a veteran leaves, the replacement is already in the building. And if you want the freshman, who could make the conversation explode nationally, it's Luke Wayful. He is another one that needs to be talked about here and needs to be considered. Wayful arrived with about as much recruiting hype as a defensive player can carry, and he was rated the #1 overall recruit in the country by one major service, and his senior production was absolutely ridiculous. 99 tackles, 37 tackles for loss, and 23 sacks. But the high school stats aren't why I care now. I care because he got to USC early, already had legitimate college size at roughly 6 foot. He was about 265, and the expectation around him has consistently been about competing for not just, maybe you can get some reps, but actual real playing time. USC doesn't need Wayful to become a superstar as a freshman. They just need disruption. They need 5 good pass rush snaps, 10 good snaps, right? A third down package that they can insert him into, one fourth quarter moment where an offensive tackle has already dealt with veteran bodies all afternoon, and now the enormous freshman who is fresh, ready to comes in and flies off the edge against you. That's where recruiting depth becomes football depth, and that's where this class starts becoming a problem for the rest of the Big Ten. USC's issue since entering the conference has never been whether South Carolina has enough athletes. The question has been whether USC could build enough real depth, especially at the line of scrimmage, to survive a Big Ten season. Look at the offensive line in this scenario, right? Kenai Pepe, a 6'7", around 330 pounds. He came in as one of the highest ranked offensive tackles USC has signed in years. And there's Breck Kolajay, I believe is how you pronounce it, another massive freshman who impressed quickly enough to put himself in the conversation for early playing time. Again, USC does not need those guys starting. That's the beauty of it. There is enough veteran experience that these freshmen can push, be in the 2 deep, develop, create competition without the entire season depending on them. And who knows, some of them might even become starters in this situation too. So, I mean, that is exactly how you want your #1 recruiting class to arrive. You invest all this money, you put it all in. You're probably not going to start all the guys, but you at least got them ready to be the next ones up. Not as an emergency rescue crew, but as enforcements. And this is where I think people are evaluating USC the wrong way. They're asking, can this freshman class live up to the ranking? And that is, a 2027 question to me. The better 2026 question is this: can 4 or 5 freshmen make USC meaningfully better right now? Because if Mosley becomes a legitimate part of the receiver rotation, Bowman gives you real snaps at tight end, Wayful gives you pass rush juice, and one of the 2 freshmen along the offensive line can become trustworthy depth pieces, this class has already changed the season. They don't need 35 stars or anything. They need a handful of contributors. That is a much lower bar. And after getting so many of these guys on campus early, it feels much more realistic. This is where I like using FanDuel to kind of reality check once games begin, right? People can say anything they want in August, and recruiting rankings can say anything in February, but once USC starts playing real Big Ten opponents, watch whether the market begins treating this roster differently. USC has the 4th best odds to win the Big Ten for a reason, right? At plus 1,400, they are leading the 2nd tier of the Big Ten, but need get the bump up into the 1st tier. They need to get that top end bump up into the 1st tier, and there's room for them there in the future. If the depth is real, eventually it will happen, because depth shows up in a lot of ways. It shows up when injuries happen and the backup isn't a massive drop off. It shows up in the 4th quarter when your defensive line still has fresh bodies. It shows up when a freshman receiver makes a 3rd down catch on the road instead of looking overwhelmed. And it shows up in November when the season has become a grind. Now, there is an obvious warning label here. They are freshmen, right? We are talking about freshmen here. I don't know if you caught that at the beginning, but we are talking about freshmen here. Some will disappear for stretches of the season. It's natural. It happens. Some will make mistakes. Some guys, push. Some guys everybody is excited about right now may barely play. They might be pushing right now, but maybe during the season something happens and they just don't play. That's normal. The overreaction would be saying USC's freshman class is about to carry this team to a championship or something like that. And that's not what I'm saying here. Don't get me caught up in that. I'm saying almost the opposite. USC finally might be good enough and deep enough that the freshmen don't have to carry anything. They just have to help and be used where they make themselves available to. Jada Mayava is already there at quarterback. There's veteran talent in the backfield, returning experience up front, older players throughout the defense. So instead of handing an 18-year-old the keys and praying he figures it out, USC can give these freshmen smaller jobs, let the talent take over for them, let them prove themselves, and that's the part that changes the timeline. If they prove themselves, if they can produce, you know you can keep them, or you know you got to let them go to the portal and go get somebody else. For years, USC fans have heard about what the program was built toward, right? Better recruiting, more depth, high school development, more South Carolina talent staying home, less dependence on constantly rebuilding the roster from the outside. Well, this class is where that idea starts getting tested. And if the freshmen are already good enough to matter before USC even reaches the future everyone keeps talking about, then the future didn't just get brighter, it got here early. If you can get those guys some type of roles and let them prove whether they are dependable, whether they can produce or not, it got here early. Do not judge this recruiting class by how many freshmen are starting week one. That's the wrong way to do it. Judge it by how many freshmen Lincoln Riley is showing that he trusts as the years go on when the games start to matter more. If the numbers get to 4, 5, maybe even 6 meaningful contributors in year one, USC's number one class won't just be a recruiting trophy. It could be one of the reasons the Trojans become much more dangerous in the Big Ten now and in the future. So let me know, which USC freshman makes the biggest impact this season to you? Is it Trent Mosley? Is it Dixon-Wyatt, Mark Bowman, Luke Wayful, or is there somebody else I didn't even mention in this video that you think could make a huge impact? Like the video, subscribe here for more Big Ten football analysis, and we'll talk more as the season continues to be on. Thanks so much for listening and watching. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.